You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. Alrighty, what a way to start the new year. It is the 2nd of January here in Australia, but it's the 1st over there for the legend that's joining me. I have with me Joe Kastaway Kulis. Mate, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Mate, you have some serious stories and some cool background.
Yeah, pretty lucky, very lucky. And in fact, what is really strange when we set up this interview, I think it would have been in sometime in the mid 70s, I decided that I was going to go to Australia and set up a taxidermy studio. And because I checked, I heard that there really wasn't any taxidermists to speak of, but there was a lot of saltwater fishing on the East Coast. And so I thought, boy, that would really be cool. So I actually set up a trip to go around the world. I went and started hunting in Hawaii, then to New Zealand, then to Australia, then to 2 or 3 countries in Africa, and then South America and back home. And so I thought that would have been the coolest thing. But actually, the big thing that put the stop to it was that they didn't have fiberglass at that time in Australia, and doing saltwater fish, that's a must. But actually, I looked at seriously of moving to Australia to set up my taxidermy business, and then in turn I stayed in the States and developed freeze drying, and it went from there on. But the big, that was pretty interesting. And I just thought that country of yours was really, it was so neat. And it was interesting that the amount of years that your country was behind us at that time. And that's why I thought, well, I had a bit of an edge on how to run the business, but if I couldn't get supplies, and that was a very important thing. But yeah, I actually seriously thought about it. And I just love your country. Really cool. Really cool.
It's it's a great country, and I likewise feel the same about the States, because when I was over there, my wife worked there for a little bit, and when we were over there, I couldn't believe how far behind we were with cars. And that the cars over there, you know, there was internet in the car and Wi-Fi and your maps, and you could track your cars everywhere. And I'm like, geez, like we still don't have that as far as I'm aware here. Like we just got a brand new car and it doesn't have the ability to connect like as a Wi-Fi in itself. Yeah. So it's funny that sometimes we are a little bit behind in different ways, but it's both have some pretty awesome, opportunities and quarry to hunt. That's for sure. Yeah. And it's definitely on my list to get over there for like an elk and things like that, because that just they are such an amazing animal. But you have had such an extraordinary life, and looking at some of the things you've done. So you've talked a bit about the taxidermy, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But you've done some things with the bow, which is pretty damn cool. And you are, to clarify for me a little bit, and I know we were chatting off air about this, but you're one of the first people over in Africa to take the big 5 with a bow. Right. And that was both white and black rhinos as well, wasn't it?
Right. And that was with a recurve. Nowadays, then after they got to, just improved, and then all the way to crossbow. But what was interesting, the bow came 2 weeks before I was leaving for Africa. And 100-pound bow is like trying to pull back a 2x4. It is unbelievably. And so it came, and there's no way I could pull it. So I had it at work at the taxidermy studio. And what I would do as I was working through the day, every half hour, I would try to pull it back. And it took a few days before I could get it pulled back. And when you hunt with a bow that strong, you pull it back and release. You don't hold it, because if you hold it, you're going to start shaking and you could hit anything. So now I could pull it back. So then I set up a target where the shop was. There was an alleyway. And so I set up a target at 30 yards away. I would go outside and I would shoot 3 arrows and come back another hour, shoot 3 arrows, come back to where I felt pretty confident with it. But what was so interesting, when the natives in Africa, because a lot of them hunt with bows, especially some of the tribes, and when they heard I was going to hunt an elephant or a rhino, they to themselves, they just laughed. And so they came and watched me shoot. And so they would try to pull the bow back, and nobody could pull it back. So and the average African in that tribe where I was maybe 5 foot. They're smaller. But they had one gentleman there who was about 6'2", and he was like the monster of the tribe. He tried to pull back the bow. He almost got it. Close. But then he started shaking. Then I knew it was done. I take it out of his hands and I pull it back like nothing. And then their eyes, then they realize, wow, maybe there is something to this. And there were only 2 other people ever that could pull the bow. One was a construction worker in the States. And when I would take it to the sportsman show that I would do, so many of them wanted to try to pull it, but I knew that they couldn't. There's no way. One construction guy did. And the only other person, there was an African we were in the Kalahari Desert, and he was a bowman. He was their hunter, really. And he was able to pull it back. But that was it, only 2 other people. But he shot a bow so often. And so that was really, really cool. But it was a real thrill. But actually, the thing about it is I was at the right place at the right time. And now you can hunt some of those animals, or the cost is just prohibitive. So I was really fortunate to be at the right spot at the right time. And I did television for a lot of years. Actually, my degree in college was in cinematography. So I had a reason to be able to film my own hunts and everything. But yeah, I was very, very, very fortunate. And like I said, right place, right time.
What is it like? I'm guessing with a recurve bow, even at 90 pounds, you're getting pretty damn close to these animals to take them out.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
what's that feel like with a line?
The thing about it is so adrenaline filled that you don't really think about it. In fact, it's really more after the fact that you do. In fact, I've been charged. I've killed, I think, somewhere around 11 or 12 lions being charged, a leopard, quite a few buffalo. And those were, when they're charging, that was with a gun. But the thing about that is when you have the experience, you don't think about it. You just react. And because you know what to do, it's not, say, that difficult. I remember one animal, it was I was guiding at the time, and there was a lion that had been wounded, and I was guiding, so the person that shot it didn't make a good shot anyway, and we're in heavy grass, and all I heard was a roar. The grass was like 6 foot tall. I couldn't see the lion. Luckily, I could hear it. All I had time to do was to shoot from the hip. And I remember jumping up to try to get up a little bit, and yelling back. And so I shoot, and then of course I back up a little bit because it was open where I had walked, and it was dead quiet. And here I had shot the lion almost dead center between the eyes, which sheer luck, sheer luck. But the thing about that whole thing, after it was over, nothing bad. The hunter came up and shook my hand, and I'm thinking, if you'd have shot right, this wouldn't have happened. But the next morning, and for about a week, you realize that if you didn't pull that off, you would be dead. So it's really after the fact. But like I say, once you get the experience, I would, with these animals that would be charging, I'd wait till they get about, I'd say maybe 10 yards, maybe 8 yards close, because I knew I only had one shot. I was using then a 375 rifle. And so I had complete trust in the gun. And so I just waited to that point, and I knew it was like, shooting a duck. But it was only because of the experience. But the thrill, it is your adrenaline. I mean, you're really on edge for any of that time, whether you're hunting any of the big animals. The thing about a rhino, his nose is big, means he can smell good. His ears are big, mean he can hear good. But his eyes are small. They're the same size as a human. And so they don't rely on eyesight. They rely on hearing and smell. So you got to play the wind. And I'll tell you though, when they're close and it looks like they know where you're at, and you're, it gets nerve wracking to say the least. But the thrill is unbelievable. And like I guess a lot of these people that do some of the stuff that I think are goofy, I guess it's all in the thrill to some extent, but not being stupid about it.
I mean, just Australia doesn't have that many predators to that sort of same aspect as Africa. Like we've got crocodiles, obviously, but
right.
On land,
right.
the worst we've sort of got here, probably your wild dogs or your dingoes. Our deer are there, and that's probably why they're in pretty good numbers at the moment.
And the buffalo.
Oh yeah, up top. You're right. Yeah, we've got buffalo.
In fact, that's where I went when I was there. That's where I went. I went to the
Arnhem Land
off the Great Barrier Reef, up to the north.
Yeah.
Cookstown, is that where I maybe landed?
Maybe. I'm not too sure.
But that was a real experience because we lived in the bush, and we had a really cool thing where we went wild boar hunting.
Yep.
And in the swamps. And what was interesting is shot a boar with the bow, and then walking out, it's dark. And so between the natives that we had and some of the other guys, it was interesting. I'll never forget this picture. As we're walking pure dark and we're carrying this boar on a pole, and the lead guy made a little torch out of some branches, and he would light the base of a tree, and the tree would ignite, but it was only the vine, and it would shoot up maybe 30 feet and was like a candle. And then he'd go maybe 10 feet more and light another tree. And so he made a path that you could follow. So we're walking through this, and I'll never forget, you look back and you see this trail, and then when it burned to the top, they all just turned to alders, and would just go to the ground, and it would go out. But the sight looking back to see that's one thing I'll never forget. And that's why I thought that country up there was really, really neat, really neat.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff here in that we have such a vast array here. I think that people sort of don't realise that we've got 6 different species of deer, and then we've got obviously your pigs, or what you guys call them, hogs over there, and then you've got buffalo up top and whatnot.
Right.
Going back to Africa, because that sort of fascinates me that you've taken some of these predators, such as lions and leopards. That's they are apex predators. To get in close with a bow, what's the distance? And are you backed up by someone with a rifle?
Sometimes, like with the rhino, I had to go alone because I needed to control the situation, when to move, when not to move. So a lot of that, but you just you have to have a tremendous amount of patience, and so that you um, move or back off and wait, or go try again. So it does take time. It's not like you go with a gun and it's 1, 2, 3. Um, and so it it's dangerous, but if you know what you're doing, it's not. It's yes, it's dangerous, but it's not that bad because you know what to expect and how to react, and don't get yourself in a position where you're in trouble. So I think that's where the experience comes in, to be able to handle those situations safely.
What sort of distance were you at, like when you took like the?
I would say nothing is over 30 yards.
Yeah.
I would say mostly 20, 25.
Yep.
Because, and like even on elephants, and that elephant, you try to shoot from the right side. His heart is closer, and you need extra long arrows. But you're close, and I mean, you hear, like on an elephant, his stomach is like, you wouldn't believe how loud it is. So you're hearing and seeing things, but again, their eyesight isn't the greatest, so they rely on hearing and smell. So you got to play those things into what you're doing, and so, but you're close, and that's, I think, what makes it so exciting, because you have to get close, because to get a good killing shot, and it's got to be in a good spot. The thing about a bow and arrow, a gun, there's a recoil, there's a sound, and the animal reacts to that. Some of these animals, a lot of the animals, don't know they're hit. So their reaction isn't to turn and to come back. They might spin, but they don't know, to them, they could have got whacked by another lion, by a a pricker bush or whatever. So that's a little bit of the advantage to the bow and arrow, is because you have that silence on your side.
Yeah, right. With the recurve, like I shoot a compound. I haven't got into recurve yet, and I'll say that because I've got a few mates that are doing it, and they love it. And what kind of arrows and that are you shooting to take down those bigger animals?
They're all aluminum, but actually with the bigger animals, I had to have special arrows made that were double shaft.
Yeah.
One shaft forced or put inside a second, so it had to have a really strong wall. Because with a big bow, you could literally break an arrow in half. Because of the way, when an arrow leaves, it's not straight. It buckles a bit. And so if it wasn't have a good strong shaft to it, it would break. So it's a double shafted and a little bit longer. And I use 3-bladed blades. Nowadays they have the folding and all the other stuff. You need expandable. You need a really strong, heavy duty blade, and it had to be, you're sharpening it, you're riding in a truck or something, and you're using a stone to keep it sharp. You're constantly, it's got to be, because the air actually, to a point, can dull a broadhead to some extent, and if it just sat. But that's why sharpness is so important on any animal at all, because you want a clean kill.
Yeah, 100%. It's fascinating at the moment. There's so much debate in the archery sort of scene in, weight of arrows. Is lighter better than heavier? Yes. They come with pros and cons, obviously, and there's now a million different, when we talk about the broadheads.
See, back then they didn't have any of this. Now they try different things. No, you were really limited, the real basics, because it was a while before recurves came, where it was only, the recurve, the compounds came. But so, now I know they have, and they've also since then have done research. I know, talking to some other people, there's a lot of opinions. I don't do as much now I'm just hunting deer and turkey. And so it's mainly just being in the woods. I have 50 acres, so I have deer on my property. And so I hunt pretty much every day in the fall, morning and evening. And almost now I'm just as happy to film, but I've gotten some really nice deer on my property. So it's enjoyable, but being able to spend time outdoors is really more important now at this point than shooting something. I'm shooting now with a camera.
It's funny that I think that's what for me it's always been like the outdoors, and I'm sort of late into hunting. I did more like spearfishing and things like that because we were coastal
Yeah.
mainly, and that sort of shifted a little bit. And I love the idea that you can just do it forever, and
Oh,
it doesn't
yeah.
matter what age you get to. You can just go out and hunt and just be in the bush camping and just surrounded by nature. And there's just such a, I guess, like a purity to the whole thing that just is amazing, where I don't think you get that in everything else.
Yes. And it's odd. Your mind, when you're in the woods, your mind is clear. You're not worrying about paying bills or where you got to go for an appointment or what you got. You really just relax and you just enjoy and take in the surroundings. And there's not too many other things that you could do that let you do that. And that's why those are so important to take advantage of, just to go for a walk. And but the thing is, you go for a walk and you keep your eyes open and pay attention to what you're seeing, the little things. And that's what makes it. And then when you see something new for the first time or a different bird or whatever, that's the true enjoyment, I think, of being outdoors.
Is that like being attuned? I've said it on the podcast before. Like one of my favorite memories is I was just sitting there waiting out hunting, and a echidna came up and walked through my legs and just kept going. And I was like, man, how many people has this ever happened to? It's such a cool
Sure.
experience that so
Yeah.
many people have only ever seen them on TV.
Right. The thing about it, like when I'm in my deer blind, I get to see things that the normal person doesn't get to see because they are acting like nobody's around. And most people, they see the person, they act differently. But when you're in a blind and an animal doesn't know you're there, they act natural. And then you get to see how that animal really lives in true life when nobody's there.
Yeah, it is one of the things I love about just being out there, especially when you're on your own and just isolated and seeing nature
Yeah.
as nature, because I think a lot of people nowadays don't get that opportunity. And, you'd know
And
better than
that's
anyone.
sad.
You've traveled so many places and been hunting in a variety of locations and different quarry and things like that. I believe do you still hold the world record for that Russian?
It's actually now it's number two, but it was number one for, wow, I don't know, 30, 40 years or
Yeah, wow.
something. And that was lucky. I mean, a lot of that stuff is luck. But yeah, that was, and I still have some world records with some of the other stuff, but that lasted a long time. And it was nice. That trip was so different because that was during the Cold War,
Mm.
and there was secrecy, and they watched you, and not like now. Now going to Russia is like going anywhere. But when you went there, or Mongolia, where I went, Russia and then Mongolia, those places you had to have a person with you all the time. You were watched. The person that they kept with you, they would ask questions. What did you ask about? So the mystique of being in that you don't have now, and that's what really made it so interesting, was the mystique of being somewhere where you were being watched so much.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be doing it in those different like what's going on in those places at the time too. As you said, you
Yeah.
don't get that now. And I think there's also the mystique gone a little bit now with the internet and so many people with social media and things get posted. So there's this almost
Yeah.
overexposure to some of the things you were sort of groundbreaking at the time doing things. And I mean, you were saying, we were chatting before and you were saying that Fred Bear hasn't got some of the species that you've got over in
Yeah.
Africa, which is
Yeah.
amazing because, you know, like what a legend as well. That's just,
Yeah.
it's awesome to hear these stories and just think how I look at it
Yeah.
now and go how sometimes difficult it can be, you know, in modern times with modern tech and gadgets and rifles and compound bows, and the reminiscing for me about how you guys did it back then. Wow. Like, it's just hats off to you guys because that's so cool.
It is. It was, well, I was trying to build my name up as a taxidermist and a guide and everything. And unless back then you were a multimillionaire, there's no way you could make a name. So I thought if I could do this that nobody else does, that would be my niche to be able to compete with these millionaires that money's no object and they can go shoot all this stuff. So I figured that might be my key, and which it was to be able to do the first on those things. And the archery was the tool, I guess I'd say, to accomplish that.
I've finally got my hands on a product that I absolutely love, and it is super simple, but also so versatile to use. This means that you can tailor how you want to have your coffee when out in the bush. If you want to support the podcast and get an awesome bit of gear that I know you will love, and how you can use the code AHBpodcast to get 10% off. The link can be found in the show notes, socials, and on the website. Final press, you'll love it. All right, you touched on it there. So you did some guiding as well. So you've guided, I believe, in Alaska and Africa and places like that. How many years did you do that for?
Oh, probably 25 or 30.
Wow.
And it's interesting when you're in Africa, you're sitting around the campfire and you're talking stories of Alaska. And when you're in Alaska, sitting around the campfire, you're talking about Africa. It's really odd, but it's so neat at the end of the day where you can tell stories and hear other stories. And yeah, it's a long time. But again, it was also a tool for me to get taxidermy because the clients that I would take automatically would give me their taxidermy work. So whether it be in Russia or in Africa or whatever, it was a way to build that business up as well to benefit from, all inclusive. And you become friendly and they ask you, would you want to do your work? So you didn't ask to ask for it.
All right, let's talk about your taxidermy because you did some things that were groundbreaking in taxidermy. So the freeze drying, I believe.
Right.
Can you tell me about how did that come about? And there's other things too, and we'll talk about them for sure. But how did that come about?
Yeah, it actually started an article in one of our hunting magazines, I think Sports Afield, and they had an article that the Smithsonian Institute was doing something with this kind of way of preserving. And I thought, wow, that is the neatest thing. So but the article did say it had to be kept in a glass dome. I thought, well, that's not very feasible. And so I got on a plane and I went to the Smithsonian and to see they had this little machine there. And I went there and I would ask him questions. And it was odd. I took notes. And what he told me one day, the next day was the opposite. So I was completely confused, but I thought I had enough of the basics. And I went home and I just figured, okay, I'm going to build a big machine. And so I found a cannery that had Campbell's Soups, had these big pressure cookers, 4-foot diameter and 12-foot long. And I built a big walk-in freezer, put 4 of them in there, and just did it. But I had so many sleepless nights. Okay, because it's like freezer burning, but it's controlled. It's a process of sublimation. It goes from an ice crystal to a gas without the liquid state. So once it's frozen, the moisture is taken out, the structure stays, but the moisture is gone. And so but I always wonder what's going to happen in a few years. But then after you do it for a while, it was like no big deal. And the biggest thing I did was like a 300-pound pony, which took forever. But then I looked tips and tricks to take some of the mass out and to save time. And so I developed ways, but I did a lot of fish. And then we got into doing pets. And then it grew into where a pet food company wanted crickets done because they had an excess of crickets. And we did thousands and thousands of pounds of crickets.
Right.
And then we did some flowers for weddings and for funerals and that had some meaning. So it grew to a lot of things. One of the biggest things, or the most valuable, maybe I would put, is documents. We could freeze dry documents that were soaked from a fire or a flood. And we did a job in downtown Cleveland where we did something like $60 million in value of these bonds and negotiable. I mean, you could walk off with them. They had guards at the studio all the time, but I only made the regular weight, which was nowhere near. I should have based it differently. But yeah, we salvaged all that stuff. There were actually a bunch of baseballs from Bob Feller autographed, and we salvaged them. And so that was some learning, but again, working with not secrecy, but with a lot of security. And so that was another whole different thing, but that was just another chapter. And then I wrote a book. So a lot of that stuff is in that. So I did that about a year ago, and I got enough to do another book. It's just getting time to do it.
I don't doubt it. That would take a lot of time to get that book out, and plus you've got a lot of stories. I believe you did glass walleye eyes as well. That was a big one too. You've done some very diverse, you really diversified what you've done over the years.
Yeah, I always believed that if I got an idea, I better do it today, because there's probably 4 or 5 other people in the world have the same idea, and whoever gets there first wins. So whenever I got an idea, boy, everything else stopped, and all my energy went into that. And it's somewhat today I'm doing that because now I'm taking all my television shows, and because nowadays resolution is so much better, so I could take those old shows, enhance them, re-edit them a little bit, put them on YouTube, and then there's a thing called YouTube Shorts. And I have another way I can make like little shorts out of it and post those up, and people could see those. So now all these television shows that have been sitting, doing nothing, I can redo all of them, and people get to see all this stuff. So that's my latest project, was pretty much taking a lot of time.
Because your show was one of the first on outdoor TV, wasn't
it? Yeah. We were the first 12 shows that started the Outdoor Channel. And I started with that, and with this radio thing we're doing now, I'm one of the first 12, which is kind of unique. But yeah, and was the start of the Outdoor Channel, and it grew and grew, and of course it's still then, and it got a little bit away from all just the outdoor stuff now. But yeah, I started with that, and got to put all those shows on there, and a lot of people. That was a fun time.
How hard was it to film those shows back then? Because, nowadays the camera equipment's so small. Like, you've got all people that can do it themselves. You can just chuck a GoPro on. I say it all the time, the GoPro attached to the bow. Back then it was probably a lot harder, much bulkier equipment. And as you said, now obviously re-editing and improving the sort of what it looks like.
You had this big camera. It was attached with a cable to a unit that did the recording, and it only recorded for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And you had to lug this around the mountains. And then it progressed and progressed. But to do it now is like, you could carry it in a little knapsack. And you had to carry all these batteries. and then you had to carry a battery charger to charge batteries at night. It was a nightmare. I mean, and the quality was okay, but nothing like today.
No.
I mean, my phone is way better than what we could do if we had today's technology. And editing is so easy now compared to then. I mean, and it started with 16 millimeter, so you had a hand crank uh, camera, and you had to carry the film and make sure you had to load it in the dark and then take it back home, and you didn't know what you had, and then to edit you had to physically splice, glue, and put two pieces together, and that was the editing. And that was like, oh my goodness. So yeah, technology today is unbelievable
Oh yeah.
and reasonable. I mean, the cost of that stuff back then, but physically it was a project. When you went somewhere, you had to carry a lot of gear, a lot.
Well, just the logistics of that, being able to, if you're going up in the mountains and you're going up for a couple of days
Yeah.
hunt, knowing how many batteries, the weight of everything to capture 20 minutes at a time, how many reels of film. Yeah, it's such an alien thing I'm a school teacher, and talking to students about some of the things, like we had the digital cameras with the film in it, like when I was growing up, and then it was such a big thing because I was able to dive and take cameras, like the underwater photos. I've got some awesome ones from Vanuatu that I remember being in that disposable. And you tell kids nowadays and they're like, what film? It's such a different.
I remember the housing that I had for the one underwater camera and thing just by itself, but you couldn't see what you were doing. You just had a hope, now you can visually see what's happening, and it's world difference. You just wonder what's going to happen in another 5 to 10 years.
It's exciting to see where it could possibly go. Like I see all these advancements, and I think I'm lucky enough to be in an era where there's been such big advancements in tech and seeing those.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're probably the same, seeing what you can do now as opposed to previously, and being able to re-enhance those images and that videos. That's cool. And chuck them up on YouTube as shorts. I love it. I can't wait to see them.
Exactly.
And then, it's just where it could possibly go. People are thinking of things that will come into, fruition that we have probably not even dreamed of. And I suppose you've sort of done some of that stuff when you created some of the things.
And I'm starting to use a little bit of AI, and I could see there is a positive. Hopefully there won't be some negatives down the road with it, but the AI I'm utilizing, writing descriptions and doing things. So there are some good positive things to that.
Oh, AI is brilliant. As a school teacher, I love it. And, I know some people are scared, but I can create lessons and differentiate for students based on their reading ability by just asking it to spit that out. And then you have the same content that you're trying to deliver to a student, but you can change the text in regards and do it by AI, and it will happen in seconds. It's unreal.
Wow, that's wonderful.
It's cool. There's some cool stuff for there, and I can see the benefit for everybody in using that and how it plays out, and especially. My concern with the AI is stuff like there's videos like a mate sent mine. So I call him the buck thief because he shot the buck I was chasing, on public land on the same morning that I was chasing. And he sent me a photo, and the AI that he's got his photo of him posing with the deer, and the deer gets up and runs away. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it was so cool. Like, you can see it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn passable. Like, it's crazy to imagine where that's going to go. And maybe people will struggle to tell what's real and what's not with some of these videos.
Well, yes. And that's almost now. You see some things, and if it looks outlandish, it probably is.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Probably not real. Yeah.
But you weren't just also hunting, were you? You got into your fishing quite thoroughly, and I think you had some charters as well.
Yeah, I had 5 charter boats on the Great Lakes, and so I salmon and walleye. That's why I developed the walleye act, because a walleye is a lot different fish than anything else. But with the charters, I did it on the Great Lakes and had 5 boats, and that kind of started as a way of also bringing in fish taxidermy. So I did the charters, and then being again at the right place, I got the fish for giant tuna in Newfoundland. And back then there were no value to it. but um, I hooked 10 tuna, landed 5. The smallest was 550. The big was 950. And but then when you would see a school, there would be thousands of fish in these schools. And like that's gone. And, and so to do something like that and being younger and in shape, the thing was after you catch one, you try to see how fast you could get it into the boat. If you can get it while he's still basically playing with the surface, if he sounds, it's 700-pound fish to lift is almost impossible. If he would die and go to the bottom, you could not lift him. And what you would have to do if that happened, you would have to slowly try to drag him along the bottom into shallower water. But so that the goal was to see could you get it in before he got his second wind. And the last one that was 950, I landed in 20 minutes, which was like they're usually 2-3 hour battles. But talk of being young and in shape, that was right time, right place. But that was some exciting fishing. I mean, you can't get any bigger, than fish like that. And it's sheer muscles, and you use your legs to pull back, and using all legs, and that was exciting. So, and the salmon, the chartering is fun. It's fun when you see people having a good time. And I did that for quite a few years. And then some of the fishing on the Great Lakes for salmon really slowed up, and then it wasn't fun anymore. When they'd only go and catch a few fish a day, it's, if they're not having, it's misery when your people aren't catching fish and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's it's one of the things with the population growing so much and the depletion of different sort of resources such as the fish and things like that. It is something that I see it and have seen it through spearfishing. Being on the coast, used to be go out in certain spots and it would have a plethora of different fish. Now, you could spend a good 6 hours in there and not see anything. So you got to travel further, and it's disappointing because those chances and opportunities. And I said that with my kids. I want to have them involved in all that thing because it was had such a big impact on my life and so much great memories.
Is it overfishing?
I think so. I don't think it's overfishing from the public. I think it's those, commercial fishermen.
No, commercial.
Yeah. And I think, but then that comes back to the public's want for the fish as well. So it's sort of that, it's that vicious cycle. And I know we farm, I think there was a stat come out the other day, we farm more salmon now than are actually wild in the oceans.
They're doing that even in Canada.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
That's become a big thing. And they're not as good tasting, and they're just not the same.
Well, they're not fed the same.
But you're right.
Yeah. So
no.
But the requirement for the population and the size we have, it's sort of, it's that necessary evil and that cycle that's just, I don't know how we get out of it. But that's the same as sort of hunting. And I'm very big on trying to, hunt and use the meat and things like that. And it's crazy down here at the moment. We basically have this war on deer, and they cull them from helicopters and just leave them to rot.
Yes.
And it's just like such a great resource. Venison is absolutely not only delicious, but really healthy meat. And we just let it rot because we don't value it, and that culture's changed.
Yeah.
Has that been a big one for you? Have you seen like a shift in the general population attitude toward hunting and the culture of hunting?
It seems like it has eased up. For a while, there seemed like there was a lot of anti groups, but that has eased. And it's like when I first did the television show, you could not show the kill shot.
Okay.
You had to pretend the gun goes off or whatever. And so it got pretty bad for a while. I never let it bother me, but that has switched, where it's not, because people, there's more hunters, and they're doing it more or as much for the food part as far as deer are concerned.
Yeah.
And in Ohio where I am, there's a lot of deer, and there's trophy hunters, but they realize how good it is So I would say it's looking better than it used to. But then you get, like California and some of the states that they tend to be that way, where most of the rest of the country isn't, and that's kind of taken over. So you don't see it like it was. It's definitely eased up because even people that don't hunt, because in the park they realize there's too many and they don't want them to suffer. So then they're having, people go and hunt, but then they get to taste it or whatever, and they realize that it's utilizing a resource, but it is really good. So it luckily has changed, quite a bit in not so much anti as it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think COVID helped a little bit with that whole COVID period, and the gaps in the supply chain and food chain has helped, I guess, change some perception of hunters and being able to source your own meat and things like that, which is, I think, a good thing. I know we still have some issues here with a lot of groups and things like that, but I mean, I don't think you're ever going to win everybody over. So you just got to, as you said, just ignore it and keep moving on and go from there. But what would be some of your most memorable hunts? Because you've done a hell of a lot over the years. Is there ones that stick out? Is there quarry that were a bit more exciting than something else, or do they all resonate with you for a different reason?
The different reasons, like I mentioned, that sheep. I got that sheep in Russia, which was the mystique around it, and being that it was a world record and gotten the last day. I mean, that really sticks out. I think like the first elephant, because it was a goal and took a lot of time. Oddly, I do another 3-hour radio show and I tell stories, and I actually was talking this past week about how I skinned out an elephant by myself.
Oh.
In 3 hours.
3 hours?
Yeah. And I had natives, we used the lorry to roll them, but I actually cut it and they would pull the skin, but I had to lift the skin. And it just popped into my head as I was talking. And I hadn't thought about that in a long time. How in the world did I do that? I was younger, in my 20s, but that had to be some feat.
Damn, yeah.
And then had nothing to drink. It was in their summertime, and in our winters, their summer. And so it had nothing to drink. After it was over, we went into town. I ordered 5 bottles of pop. I drank 3 without stopping, and then drank the next 2. So that was pretty memorable, and I got a bunch of still pictures about it, because of, when I think back, that took a lot of strength and a lot of initiative. But then the very first trip, I had goals, and of course my goal before I hit 21 that I was going to go to Africa, and I did. I made it, and I thought my biggest thrill would have been to be charged by a Cape buffalo. And on the last day of the hunt, I had to catch a plane that evening, so we had a ride back to town, but we got up early and found 5 buffalo. The males are always together in small bunches. I was hunting with a double barrel rifle on that hunt. And I thought the coolest thing would be to be charged by a Cape buffalo. And what happens is I shoot this buffalo, and he's standing there after I shot, and he ran off, and he's standing there, and I was with this little native. And so I see him standing there at, maybe 40 yards, and he turns, and sure enough, he charges. And I'll never forget, this little African was right behind me, hiding. And the only English word I think he knew was to shoot, the word shoot. And he keeps saying, shoot, shoot, shoot. And here's this buffalo coming, and I probably shoot him at 15 yards and kill him right there. But that was like, I thought that would be the neatest thing. And it came to fruition. So that's one that I don't think I'll ever forget. There's so many that come, I am really lucky that I can remember these stories in some pretty good detail. Like that lion that was charging. I had a leopard that I was guiding, and a hunter wounded it, and we were going through grass that was really low. And I thought, how could this leopard be laying here and we can't see him? So there's another guy to my left, a big guy, like 6'3", and big stocky guy. And I look over and this leopard jumps on him, and I see his gun go flying and knocks him down, but the leopard left him. And he took a bound or two towards me. I got up on a little bit of a stump, but he turned. It's like he knew who was the guy that wounded him to begin with. And now he's headed towards that guy, and he's going broadside to me at about 20 yards. And I shoot and roll him at the guy's feet. And the guy shoots, but I knew he didn't hit him. But to make the guy feel good, I congratulated him, nice shot. And he had a cameraman behind him. And after he got home, he said, oh, well, it's pretty obvious. The bullet hole's in the side, not in the head or anywhere. And he says, I didn't shoot that leopard. But that same gun, it fit me so good, I could just point it. But to get a leopard running crossways, headed to a guy, because if it would have got onto him, that would have been bad. Because what a leopard does, he bites on the neck, but he uses his hind feet, and he takes the person's intestines out right now. So if it doesn't kill you, you're going to die from the infection and everything. But so, and just to roll him right by his feet, that was the one I thought about the next morning for quite a while. So those are some pretty memorable ones, I'd have to say.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Is there favorite place?
I don't know. I love Russia. I love Africa because it's, when you're back there, you're in the middle of nowhere, and I think that's probably, I would have to say, the mountains. There's something about being in the mountains and to wake up in the morning when the sun is just starting to come up over the mountain, and the freshness of the air and the crispness and the views, or the colors in the fall, oranges and reds and, neat colors. So both of those are neat in different ways. But I think when you realize you're in the middle of nowhere and maybe nobody ever walked where you walked.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so exciting and so enjoyable. And the memories are just, luckily with this book, the main thing I wanted to be able to do was to have pictures. So almost all the chapters have pictures that relate to the stories, because that's the true way of really telling a person what it was like with a picture. So wherever I could do that, and I did it with most of them, it was that was the hardest part. The writing wasn't too bad. It was the formatting of the pictures and getting everything to fit. And but the pictures and then at the end I have a collage of pictures, and so that, and of course that's what everybody likes to look at, is the pictures. So I got some good ones.
I don't doubt it, and I know you got some cool stories. As you mentioned earlier, we're both on Outdoor Radio Network, and your show has. So, how long have you been doing radio for? Because I know you've been doing that a while.
I've been doing that for 14 years.
You're right.
Doing the radio. It started as a 1-hour show. I thought that's not enough, and then pretty soon after that, it went to 2 hours. And then it went to 3, and the only reason it doesn't go any further is after that there's a Irish show that's on for 2 hours. So and I start early in the morning, so I couldn't go the other way. But yeah, I've been doing that, probably TV for 25, and then the radio for a good 14. Actually, it's coming up probably in next month, where it would be the anniversary, probably year 15. But it's so enjoyable, and it goes so fast, and we have a lot of women listeners.
You're right.
Because we talk hunting, fishing, cooking, baking, bird watching. I mean, a little bit of everything, but we laugh a lot. And I think that's why women like listening. It's a light, easy show, and laughter is so important, especially today.
Well, I mean, it is, and I think you're a bit of a jack of all trades. You've done, and you not only your business ventures, but hunting and fishing, and you've done a lot of all over the place, which is great. And I only hope that when I get to your age, I can reminisce back on my life, and it's been as eventful and jam
Oh
packed with
yeah,
excitement.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. It's got to be blessed with the memory to remember them, but you got to take advantage. I think that's the biggest thing. Of any door that if it opens, you better run through it right away.
Yes, definitely.
You know,
Did you find that one of the hard things with the book is did you ever like sort of I do it all the time is that I'll reminisce about something and then out of the blue will remember something that I totally forgot about?
yeah. Well, what had happened is I wrote it, and I had somebody look at it, and they said, "Yeah, yeah, it's okay," and it sat for a year. And then, so I went back last winter and I thought, I started reading them and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're terrible. They're terrible. And so I started going through, and then as I would rewrite them, more came to mind. So I got to enhance them more and made them more interesting. And so and I had enough for one book and probably almost enough stories for a good almost a half of the second one. But again, I got to have those pictures. But it's some of it is one thing will lead to another, and looking through old pictures helped a lot because I always took a lot of pictures, and seeing those pictures, that's what would trigger a memory. You say, oh yeah, what about that? And then if you think about it a little bit, it should come back. So then you can enhance it. And then as you write, you're thinking more things come to mind. So you get to expand on it. And so it's kind of like an ongoing, but I'd have to say either the old television shows or the pictures is a good thing to rely on to trigger the memory. And hopefully everybody has it. I don't know. I've been lucky. So hopefully you will too.
Well, fingers crossed, because I'd be a very happy man if I get to do half of what you have done in your lifetime. It's awesome, and I love the fact you've come on the show to talk about it. So I really appreciate your time in doing that.
Oh, that's cool.
Where can people find you? Obviously, Outdoor Radio Network, your show's on there as well, which is fantastic. Available on obviously different players there, and then live in the US. What about some of your other stuff so people can check out all the different things for you, Joe?
Probably the easiest thing is just to go to www.kastaway.com with a K, Kastaway, and that puts you in the website, which shows you a lot. And then the YouTube channel is Joe Kastaway Kulis. And so there you could follow all that, but probably the website's the easiest because it goes that, and it's art because we're used to this country and don't realize that somebody in another country could go there just like people in this country. So I think the website that's been a huge thing. I think social media on Facebook and then the website. Those two things probably are the best way to check it all out, and hopefully they'll see something they'll enjoy looking at.
Well, I'm most certain they will because I know I do. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you
This was fun.
very much for coming over. And I love what you're doing. I love the show. Keep it up. Can't wait to see, and hopefully I'll be following in your footsteps and out there hunting for a lot of long years ahead. So and have some of the memories you do.
You're nice and young, and you just gotta have the push, and don't let anything deter you from doing it, because you got to have the push, because that's what happens. A lot of people, a roadblock will come and they give up, and don't give up. And because there's always a way, I didn't have all the money to do all that stuff. But I figured if I took people there and took clients, so there's always a way if you have the fortitude to figure out how to do it.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. Persistence is key, and every little bit you do means you're going to be that much better tomorrow and going forward. So it's a really good way. So, Joe, happy New Year. I know it's still day one over there, so happy New Year, and I can't wait to see what you do in 2025. So thanks very much for coming on, and listeners, I know you'll enjoy this one. I've had a great time. What a legend. Joe Kastaway Kulis, mate, enjoy the year.
Good. No, so nice visiting with you. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it.
Listeners, bye for now. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyonds. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.